Secretary. Thank you. Thank you, board members. This is Ryan Germany. I wanted to give an emphasis on brief debrief of the 2020 elections. The purpose of this meeting is really to kind of help clear the decks of some cases to really prepare for the cases that were brought after regarding 2020 election to be heard by this board, sooner rather than later this year. But knowing that there's a high interest level in that, I did want to speak briefly on what we saw and what we didn't see in the 2020 election. We'll obviously hear more about specific cases when those cases are presented to the board from the investigators, but many of those are still under investigation and aren't ready for presentation yet. So first of all, in kind of the lead up to the election, obviously we knew that 2020 was going to be a tough election year. We thought that was going to be the case because we were implementing and rolling out a new system, implementing paper ballots for the first time, and having to train counties and ourselves, frankly, on a new system. So that was supposed to be kind of the main challenge. Then, of course, we had COVID happen in kind of the March timeframe, and it really threw a loop for the whole election cycle in terms of how people basically chose to exercise their right to vote. Frankly, the counties, I think, especially in November and January, performed admirably. They had a massive increase in the number of absentee voting. It caused some issues in the primary, particularly in Fulton County, with just the volume that was unprecedented in terms of getting out absentee ballots, getting everything processed. But I think based on some of the things that we were able to help with by bringing in the absentee ballot vendor, I think then by November and January, we really saw them perform admirably in the face of very difficult circumstances. So what we didn't see, I'll start with that because elections have become kind of a rife spot for misinformation, and that's not new, but we certainly heard some news this year. The Dominion machines performed well, and that's not to say there were no issues with them, but the issues that we saw had to do with basically people using them for the first time and maybe not doing something correctly. But the issues that you heard about on certain TV stations with things going out of the country or interference from foreign governments, we have not seen any evidence of that, and in fact, all the evidence I think points against that. Many of those claims are in litigation now, and I think that will come out through that process. So we did not see any issues like that, and in fact, one thing that we did, and the Secretary ordered a full hand tally of all the ballots that confirmed the results of the election, and that's what we saw. We did not see any issues of county election officials, I think, cheating or doing anything like that. We got some allegations of that, but again, I would just say what we saw is our county election officials did an excellent job in very difficult circumstances in very contentious elections. And we also didn't see any evidence of widespread fraud. Going into what we did see, kind of off of that, there's always some number of ineligible voters who vote in an election. That's always the case. The law, the way our law and federal law and really all states' law is set up, is that it's better to let someone vote, and then if they voted and they weren't able to go after them after the fact. Of course, there's guardrails in place to minimize that, but you've got to keep them in place in a way that keeps the system accessible to eligible voters. So we did see some number of ineligible voters. The numbers that were thrown about after the November election about these large numbers of ineligible voters, that's not what we're seeing at all. Some of the numbers that were thrown out, some of these numbers we could check pretty quickly, basically doing data reports. For instance, I think there was an allegation that 10,000 underage people voted. Well, we can see the birthday of everyone who voted, and the number of people who voted who were underage is 0. There was an allegation that I think 2,500 unregistered people voted. Again, we can check to see who voted and see if they were registered, and the number of unregistered people who voted is 0. There was an allegation that 2,500 felons voted. We have data on that as well, and we are investigating potential felon voters. I think we have 74 potential felon voters, and then we've got to obviously do investigation. And when you do those investigations, you kind of find, okay, maybe their sentence was up, maybe they're not the same person, but that's the kind of complete universe of that. We got an allegation that 435 people voted in multiple states in November, and we have been investigating that, and we have ruled out all but 2 voters. We're still going through some of them, waiting on some data from other states, and again, I think that basically shows where that is. Again, I think there's an allegation that thousands of dead people voted, and I think we've investigated that as well, and our investigators have spoken to some of these alleged dead people. So again, that's not the case as well. We do have I think 2 that we're investigating, and then we'll continue to see, but that's not going to be more than a handful either. The one that's a little bit tougher, and this year especially because of the increase in absentee voting, is people who are registered but no longer live in Georgia. The reason that's tough is because there's some people who don't live in Georgia who are still eligible voters. For instance, obviously, military personnel are still eligible voters in Georgia. Other people who are in other government service are eligible in Georgia. If you are temporarily somewhere else, but still basically intend to reside in Georgia, college students, people who kind of have jobs where they go, maybe work different places around the country for a little bit. So that really takes a more in-depth investigation. Now, we looked at the numbers. I think the allegation was that 20,000 people voted who no longer live in Georgia, and the number that's not even close to an accurate number. The numbers that we have seen based on just looking at national change of address data and people who voted, it's significantly less than that, and we're going through those people as well. But while that will be elevated, I think compared to past elections, just because of the increase in absentee, I don't think that it will be more than it will be nowhere close to the margin in Georgia. But going off of that, another thing that we did see is we definitely saw in both November and January, third-party groups kind of affiliated with campaigns are not officially affiliated, but who kind of interested and have an interest in who wins, they would definitely push the envelope in terms of rules. We saw that with monitors who were kind of pushing the envelope and sometimes making election officials feel uncomfortable. We saw that with polling place restrictions and people, getting right up to the line on that, and sometimes over the line. So that's something that we did see, and we also saw that, I think, in terms of going back to what I was talking about out-of-state voters, is people really, I think, reaching out to people who maybe no longer live here, but who, due to federal law restrictions, are still on our voter rolls, and even telling them, oh, you can still vote in Georgia. So that's something that we did see that I think is problematic. So I'll stop talking, and I'm happy to take any questions from the board, but I just wanted to give you all a sense of what we did see and what we didn't see. And I think the bottom line is we did not see any widespread or systematic frauds. We did not see any failures of equipment or anything not working like it was supposed to, other than perhaps some user error, or perhaps kind of the odd piece of equipment that didn't start up correctly. But we didn't see any of this foreign interference or changing votes or anything like that. We did see some things that I think we need to think about going forward, and I kind of put them into three different categories. One, we just had the first election with the new system, so you learn things from that. And I think you guys on the board, and I know the General Assembly is doing it right now, can think about, okay, what did we learn? What do we need to sort of shore up from a process perspective based on this new system that we have? Two, all the indications are that we are going to have very close elections in Georgia going forward. So that means that I think we, or the State Election Board and the General Assembly, need to think about, okay, what are our procedures to make sure that they're going to be good for very, very close elections. And that's, frankly, a lot of states are not in that camp from a statewide perspective. So we need to make sure that we have good process and procedures for that reality. And then third, what we've definitely seen over the past few election cycles, because of, I think, certain actions by candidates post-election, is a decrease in confidence of the election systems and therefore the legitimacy of election results. That's really the main thing that I think we need to focus on as a board and as the General Assembly, and then in our office as well. But to really build back that confidence that has been torn down, and I think we need to think about that from what are we asking our election officials to do. Last year was certainly a different situation, and again, I think our election officials performed really well. But what we asked them to do last year was it was way beyond the call of duty. And when we ask them to do that much, then we're putting in places where there's going to be things that fall through the cracks or other issues, or things that from a perception standpoint can lead to certain allegations. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about things going forward. From a confidence perspective, from a process perspective based on close elections, and from a what did we learn, especially within the first year using new equipment. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I appreciate y'all's service.
This is Matt Mashburn. I do have one question. Just from a public education standpoint, or kind of get out to the public, all tabulating, counting, certifying, accounting for in-person voting, all of that has been done. Is there anything that's still left to be done for the 2020 general election? Other than us hearing cases that came out of it, but is there anything in the tabulating, counting, certifying process that's still underway, auditing?
Everything's been counted, everything's been audited. I know that some counties, particularly in January, might still be looking at credit for voting to make sure they gave people proper credit for voting, which is basically when you vote absentee, particularly by mail or in person, the county has to first, check your ballot in, give the voter credit, and then later, scan the ballot, which tabulates the vote. I think we did see some issues with that based off of the volume that I think was new. We've been working with counties to make sure that they are giving the correct credit for voting. And I believe that is complete for both November and January. There might still be a few counties where we're following up with them to say, hey, in January, did everyone get their credit? So, but that would be it.
Thank you.
Nothing further from me, Mr. Secretary, unless you have any questions.
You're muted. You're muted, Mr. Secretary.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Matt. I have one more, if I might.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Just again, for public information purposes and to get the word out, when we say we've investigated the underage voters and the number is 0, other than cases that we have, and those have their own lives, they take as long as they take, but those numbers are the final numbers. When we say we've looked at it at 0, we're not expecting any of those to change, right?
No, that's not going to change. The ones we're still investigating are, out of the 395 people who were alleged to vote in 2 different states, we're still going through some of them. I think we're about halfway through right now, just waiting on some states. Some states are quicker to get us information than others.
And the felons was 74, and we're working through that. But the unregistered voters,
that's a maximum.
Yeah,
so it's going to end up being less than that.
And so the unregistered voters 0, that's the number.
Correct.
Okay. And the underage, that's the number.
Correct.
Okay.
The ones we're still investigating are the people who voted in different states, but I think what we're going to see is the trend holds up, where it's going to end up with, a handful, which is frankly not dissimilar to past elections, and then the people who are out of state. So that investigation continues as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Okay, we can now roll into the investigation reports. The first one are the consent cases. Before I get to that, Jasmine, I didn't have a chance to ask you this question, but in my book,